Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today we're back working on the metal planer restoration, and we are getting closer and closer to getting this machine under power. So in my last episode related to the planer, we got the motor mounted up in here that will drive the counter shaft up top. Today, what we're going to be working on is getting a motor starter on here and getting all this stuff wired up so that we can turn the motor on and off. Just the next step. So we're just going to mostly be doing electrical work, doing some fabricating to make some holders to mount some electrical components to the machine, and just getting everything wired up. So let's show you the game plan here. So the first thing I need to do is mount a motor starter to the machine so that I can start my wiring process. And the motor starter I'm going to use is this unit right here. This is sold by American Rotary, and I contact those guys, and they sent me down one of their new motor starters that they are now selling. Now, you guys know American Rotary is a sponsor of my site. I've got a 40 horsepower American Rotary phase converter that I use to generate three-phase power in my shop. Been extremely happy with these guys. They told me a while back that they were now offering a motor starter as part of their line, and I just wanted to give it a try, so they sent this one along to me. And on the inside of this is a modern motor starter that's in here. It's got a nice enclosure on it, and we're going to mount this to the machine. Now, I have decided I'm going to mount it kind of right down here on the back side of this machine where it's out of the way. It's not going to hurt anything. We're going to mount it down about like this right here, and I have already made a little some metal TIG welded little piece right here, and the box will mount to this down below. This is just going to be a hanger on here. I partially chose this site because there were two tapped holes right here with a 5/8 hole going into it. They are already tapped. I did take a fresh tap and just clean it out because they were full of crud, but I didn't have to drill and tap those. I don't know what these holes were for. They were in the machine when I got them. There's been nothing in these bolt holes in many, many years. I imagine that at some time they had some type of bracket that was coming up off of this to support something, and this was just something left over from a modification done in the past. We're going to take advantage of it and mount this piece right here like such. And the first thing I need to do is get these holes transferred over to this so that I can know exactly where to put those in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of mark the center for the first one, and we'll use a little center punch device in here to get this second one centered on here. So let me grab, I don't have a Sharpie. I'll grab a Sharpie. We'll go ahead and drill a hole in this top one, and we'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to transfer this hole over so that I can get it to line up just right. Now, to transfer that second hole to get it lined up just right, I'm going to use what's called a transfer punch. And these, I've got these in a lot of different sizes. As you can see, this is a drawer out of one of my toolboxes. I have, over the years, put together pretty much a complete set of these. There's still a few sizes I haven't come across in the wild yet. Most of these are made by Hyman, H-E-I-M-A-N-N Manufacturing. I don't think those guys are still in business, but there are still some companies that are making these. A couple of these are different brands in here as well. So I'm going to get my set for 5/8 11. Which is that one right there, and we'll use this to transfer those punches. Let me show how that works. So there's on the end of this tube, there's a cap. You take it off, and on the inside of this, you got a bunch of these little transfer plugs, and I think there's 6 of them in this set. We're only going to use one on this one right here. I'm going to put my cap back on. And basically what you got is, it looks almost like a set screw. It's threaded to that, but if you look on this end, you have a center punch right in the center. Also notice that little hex shape. That is for inserting it. On the other end of this little holder, there's a hex shape that matches that. You can put that on the end and use that to kind of drive that screw in there. If you need to get a wrench, to tighten it in there, you can. What we want to do is just screw that in there until that center punch is just sticking proud. just a little bit. So that basically I'm trying to feel here so that that flat there is more or less flush with the metal behind it. That's pretty close right there. Put this in place like such. Make sure that's hanging more or less straight up and down. And now I'm just going to take a hammer and we'll hit that right there on top of that. And that should transfer a center punch right in the center of that hole. Now I can take this off. I've got that center punch hole, and that should be right in line with the hole above it for the proper spacing between these two holes. So that is a way you can actually use a center punch, a transfer punch, to transfer a hole pattern. If you have an existing hole pattern with tapped holes, it's a very handy little tool to have. All right, our holes are drilled. Let's see how they line up here. Put our top one in first. And this one should go right in. Let's see. There it goes. All right. Now, I did notice that we got a little piece down here that it kind of stands off, so I'm going to put some washers behind these when we screw them on to just kind of stand the top part off. But before I do, I need to drill the mounting holes down here to mount the actual motor starter tube. Let me go get that done next. Well, there we go. That's all mounted up there. Looks good. I just drilled some holes in the back of that for the mount the motor starter tube, put a couple of washers behind it to offset it like we talked about, and there we go. Well, here's a view from the back side. You can see I just drilled 3 holes, matched up with the holes in the enclosure, and we just used some 1/4-inch machine screws to go through there to hold it in place. I'm going to take it all off now. We're going to spray paint that about black and let that dry, and then we'll come back and put it back on. I got another little bracket I need to make on the other side, so we'll work on that while the paint's drying on this one. So next up, I need to have a start-stop button to start and stop the motor that will control the motor starter. And I dug around and found this little one here. I would like to find something that's a little bit more vintage looking, but for right now, we're going to put this one on here. This is something that's easy enough to swap out later on. And my idea is that this is kind of the operating side of the metal planer. This is the side that I'll be working from most of the time. And I want to put a switch kind of right in this general vicinity. And I want it to be kind of sticking out from the machine so that I'm just not over here quite into the belts as much. The belts will be kind of coming down right in here, so I don't have to reach my hand in quite as far. We may end up putting some belt guards on this at some point in time as well, but that's kind of my idea. So again, using existing holes in here, I had these 2 bolts that were coming through the casting that holds the bracket up for the counter shaft holder, and those were drilled and tapped. I just took the bolts out and put a little bit longer bolt in there, and this will give me something that I can put a piece of metal on. So we're going to drill 2 holes, a piece of metal will go up on that. I'm probably going to use this piece of steel right here. It's going to come over, then I'm going to have a probably a piece of square tubing that comes out from that, out however far I decide to come, and we'll mount this piece of metal on the end of that square tubing, and that's what the switch plate will mount to, and that will let me come in here and use the push button controls. So let me get some measurements, and we'll go ahead and get that fabricated up as well. So I've got my first piece cut and my first hole drilled. It's going to mount in here just like such. And again, we're going to use the transfer screws. I think I called this a transfer punch a while ago. This is actually a transfer screw. There is a difference, a transfer punch. I've got a set of those as well. Has the different size diameters for transferring a hole. This is for transferring a threaded hole where you have threads already in it. All right, that's good. We will Put that one on there. Make sure I get that level. And right there, we should have a nice center punch hole. We'll go drilling that out, and we should be ready to go right back on there. See how it fits. Just like it's supposed to. Now I can take some nuts on these studs, tighten those up, and that should firmly attach that bracket that we can mount our switch to. All right, let's get the switch backing holes drilled on it. So this is the piece of metal that's going to be the backing for the switch, and this is the switch that'll go on there. There are two mounting holes in here, opposite of one another. And similar approach here, we're going to be using transfer punches this time. So we were using the transfer screws a minute ago, and I mentioned there's a difference between transfer screws and punches. These are the actual punches. This set here comes in fractional sizes from, what is that, 3/32 up to a 1/2 inch. I got another set that goes from 1/2 inch to 1 inch. And what we got here is I got a punch that matches that hole diameter. So I'm just going to put this on here, and we'll come in, get our punch. Let me make sure I got that right where I want it. I'm going to get my punch right there in that hole, and we'll just tap it in place. All right, now I got a center punch where I can drill that hole, and I'm going to drill the first hole, then we'll put the screw in there, and then we'll come back and do the second one. It just will move around, but having that screw in there will positively get it in the exact right spot. So let me figure out what size screw we need. Probably a 3/16 inch hole, which is the same size as this one, and we'll go ahead and get those put in there and have that part done. Got our first hole drilled. We're going to use a 1024 screw. It'll drop right down through that 3/32 hole, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. We'll just let that kind of hang out the back there, but that will just kind of index that in place where we want to hold it at, and allow me to get the second hole lined up here. There we go. All right, let me go drill that one out. And there we go. We got our two screws holding that in. Got our plate mounted on the back. That'll give us a nice bracket to mount to. So now I need to get my little offstand piece. The offset piece is going to go between that back plate and the front plate. So there's the bracket that'll mount to the machine. We're going to put an offset piece in between these. I need to measure that and find that piece of stock and get that welded up, but we're moving right along. So I think we got our pieces cut out. We got our back piece. Again, this goes over the two studs, brings the arm over. I've got a piece of square tube in here that we're going to weld on right there, and then we will come out and have this plate on the end to mount our switch to. So that is my plan. I'm going to go over and weld this up, and we'll probably weld it off camera, TIG weld it up, and we'll be ready to roll. All right, my welding is done. For whatever it's worth. My TIG welding isn't the prettiest in the world, but it'll hold. Well, I like the concept here. It's a little bit, I think what I'm going to do is drill and tap me another hole right below that, and that should make that plenty stable enough. But that should work just fine. I like having that kind of right there where it's easy to get to. I'm not having to reach way back in here, but still should have plenty of clearance. I'm gonna have to make a little bit of a tweak. It's a little bit crooked, but we can fix that easy enough and get some paint on there. And I think we'll be ready to start our wiring. Just revisiting, made a few adjustments here. We put another screw in here and did some tweaking into our panel here. This is much more solid. That's not even fully tight, I just hand tight, but I can live with that. Got a little bit of shake in it, but it's not going anywhere. It's gonna work just fine. So guys, we have our electrical work all figured out here and done. I'm gonna real quickly just kind of go over an overview of what all we did here. So first off, here's our power source. We are plugged in to a 3-phase circuit, and I'm using twist lock disconnects here, and this serves as a disconnect for the machine. On any 3-phase machine, or really any machine, you should have a way to disconnect it from the power if you're doing work to the machine or whatever. In the case of these twist locks, that is my disconnect. I'm disconnected. I just unplugged the machine. If you're hardwired in on a machine, you really need to have a physical disconnect switch where you can turn things off. So that wire comes over, goes into our American Rotary motor starter, which I've got all buttoned up right now. And guys, I'm not in this video going to go over how to wire up a motor starter, but I did shoot a separate video on just that, where I talk about the circuits and talk about where you can really understand what's going on with these motor starters, how they work, and how to wire up a simple 3-wire push button motor starter station. And I'm going to post that as a separate video. If you're interested in that, want to see how the electricity works, see how the circuits work, go check out that video. But in the meantime, we've got it all worked out. So the power comes in, goes into the motor starter. The motor starter has an electrical contacts in it, so whenever the coil is energized using the voltage from the line here, when you push the button, it energizes a coil, which closes the contacts in the motor starter. The motor starter also has overload protection in it, whereas if the motor starts drawing too many amps, it will shut everything off and protect the motor. But then the voltage comes out of the motor starter and goes up to the motor itself. Also, we've got our control wires coming out of here. So there's basically 7 wires going up this line. 3 wires for your 3 hot wires for the 3-phase, 3 wires for the control circuit, and a ground for safety purposes. And again, we'll go over all that in a separate video if you're interested in seeing it. So coming up from the motor starter, we've just got some flex pipe on here. That can't hold all of our electrical wires. It goes around, it goes over to the motor, and on the top of the motor, I've got a little electrical box there. The 3 hot wires for the 3-phase motor connect to the motor up in there, and then the wires for the control voltage goes straight through that box out the other side and across to this other piece of flex pipe that comes around to the actual push button station. And again, we have 2 buttons on here. One is a start button, one is a stop button, and they do exactly that. Whenever we push this button right here, here's our motor. I'm gonna push the button. You can see it turns the motor on. All right. Whenever I hit the stop button, it turns the motor off. So very simple circuit there. And again, I'll go over how to wire all that up in a separate video if you're interested. And there we go. There's our electrical system. We have the motor running. Now, next step is to get it belted up to the counter shaft. But before I do that, I've got a pump, an oil lubricator that we're going to need to belt up to the counter shaft as well, so that whenever the motor's running, it's pumping oil to the ways on the machine. I've still got to get that worked out. Now that I've got the motor mounted on there, I'm really to the point where I can make my brackets and stuff to get that pump mounted on there. I've got a plan on how to do it. I just got to get it done. Once we do that, we can get our belts on here, belt this machine up, and try her out. See how it works. Maybe see that table go back and forth for the first time. And then as soon as we get all that sorted out, make our first chips on this machine. So it is coming along nicely. Well, there we go. We got our electrical work done. Required doing some fabrication to have some brackets to hold the motor starter as well as the push button station here. Got to do some wiring in here. Like I said, didn't go over that in this video, but if you're interested in the circuitry and understanding and seeing the actual circuits and seeing how this push button station works, if you've ever needed to wire up a motor starter and didn't know where to go, I'm going to try to explain all that in that other video so that you can wrap your mind around it and kind of see how those circuits work. Once you see it, once you understand it, it's very simple. But when you open up a box and there's just a bunch of wires there, it's like I have no idea which wire needs to go where. But I'm going to try to make sense out of that for you in that separate video that we're going to post at the same time as this one, so you go check that out. So with that, that is going to be a wrap on this episode. As always, thank you guys for watching. And like I always say, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thumbs up and comments are appreciated. Hit the bell icon so you get those notifications. And again, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.